EWTN.
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-833-288-3986.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Call to Communion here on EWTN. This program is just for you if you are a non-Catholic. That is why we exist on this program, is to answer your questions, perhaps a very simple question, perhaps something a little more complex. We're here for you. Here is our phone number, 833-288-EWTN, if you have a question about the Catholic faith, or if you'd like to tell us what is stopping you from becoming a Catholic. Again, 833-288-3986. If you're listening to us outside of North America, please dial the number 1 and then 205-271-2985. And, of course, you can always send us an email. The address for that, ctc@ewtn.com. ctc@ewtn.com. Charles Beery is our producer. Matt Kabinski is our phone screener. Jeff Burson is on social media. If you want to ask a question via YouTube or Facebook, we are streaming there right now, live and in color. All you have to do is put your question in the comments box. Jeff will see it. He'll send it to us here in the studio, and we'll take care of it. I'm Tom Price, along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Very well. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing decent, thank you.
Bit of a globetrotter, aren't you?
Yes, I had a wonderful time in Frisco, Texas this weekend with the Catholic Brothers in Christ, North Texas Men's Conference.
A suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Exactly.
A beautiful area. I love Frisco. It's very, very nice. And you were there speaking with Father Donald Calloway?
Yes, and Matthew Leonard. Three of us were on the program.
Wow. So you split the keynote.
We split the keynote, yep.
So what did you talk about?
I talked about having a relationship with Christ and what that means for a Catholic. Because my position is that Catholics have a relationship with Jesus, but it's different. It's different. There's a Catholic way of doing it, and I wanted to talk about the Catholic way of doing this.
See, if you were not Mr. Vegan Pants, I would ask you all about Texas barbecue, Texas meat in general, all sorts of food, but I can't go there, can I?
Well, I did go out to eat Saturday night with fella that I know in Dallas, and we actually went and ate Mediterranean food. So it was Texas falafel.
Texas falafel. I'm sure there's a book in there somewhere. So we're going to lead off here with an interesting question from Christina in Perth, Western Australia. Christina says, is it a sin not to tithe 10% of your income? Looking forward to your response. God bless. Christina in Perth, Western Australia.
Thank you, Christina. It is not a sin to omit a 10% tithe.
Okay.
The church does not ask us to tithe 10% of our income. The church asks us to contribute to the temporal needs of the church.
Okay.
And to give to the poor.
So it's fairly open as to how you fulfill that,
It's
right?
fairly open. And there are people who give 10% of their income. There are people who give a lot more. There are people who give less as circumstances require.
Sure.
The important thing is to support the temporal needs of the church and to give to the poor.
Very good. And there you go, Christina. Glad that you're listening in Perth, a beautiful part of a beautiful country of Australia. Here's one now from Veronica. Hello, Dr. Anders. I'm a cradle Catholic. Besides going to church, praying, confession, and other spiritual acts of mercy, what can I do to avoid purgatory? That place scares me. Because I was born a sinner, I will die a sinner. Please advise. In addition, after death, why do we have a second judgment? Does the first judgment send us to where we will abide? Thank you, Veronica.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. I really appreciate the question. So your question is interesting. You said in the premise of your question that you were born a sinner and you think that you will die a sinner. That's not necessarily the case. And the church teaches that we can, in fact, stop sinning, that such a thing is possible. Not easy, but possible.
Okay.
And you listed a lot of very commendable religious activities, but the point of those religious activities is ultimately to converge on the transformation of our moral life. And so the real focus of our religious striving isn't the activities themselves. it is the conformity of our will to Christ that should be the result of those activities. But the important thing is the conformity of the will to Christ. It is the transformation of our interior life, what Jesus called the one thing necessary. And the church actually has a fairly robust account of what that entails. And you probably have never heard this from the pulpit, but I'm going to give you a couple of the elements. The first stage in growing in conformity to the will of Christ is to purify our passions, to seek the conquest of the passions, not be thrown everywhere hither and thither by our immediate reactivity and our sort of habitual responses to things and our lusts and our desires and our pride and concupiscence and all the rest of it, but to sort of bring kind of order to that cacophony, that symphony in our mind that's trying to drag us away. And obeying the commandments and engaging in religious practice is definitely part of that, but so is a life of prayer and meditation, of deep self-examination, of spending time doing that interior work. For some people, maybe even seeking therapy for obsessions that they have. All these kinds of things can play into developing that purging of our inner life of those passions. The other step in the spiritual life is the illumination of our conscience. And I think, really looking at the example of Christ and the apostles, that what that means is that we have to grow in charity by being able to consider other people's points of view. And so time that we spend with other human beings in service to them, really making an effort to find out where they're coming from, what their needs are, not simply trying to impose, my own sanctification on them as a goal, but really attending to them and trying to be charitable and empathetic to them, so that I can develop a broader perspective and get out of my own egocentric point of view. That's illuminating, and as a tremendous part of what it means to grow in holiness, right? So that we can actually come to see Christ in the other. So this conquest of the passions and this illumination that enables me to find Christ in the otherwise vile person of my neighbors, right, that I might previously have hated, loving the enemy. These are the really critical steps in things like Mass and devotions and rosaries and the fasts of the church. All of those things are meant to serve that good of the interior life. They're not activities done for their own sake. They're done for the sake of the transformation of our moral life into the image of Jesus.
Veronica, thanks so much for your email. Glad to hear from you today. And in a moment, we're going to get to the phones and talk with Marie in Ohio. Have a couple lines open for you as well at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to communion on this beautiful Monday afternoon here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Hello, Journey Home family. Next time, we'll welcome Mark Lozano to the show. Mark is a former atheist and will share what led him to come home to the Catholic Church. Share the journey next time on EWTN's The Journey Home.
The Journey Home, tonight, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and television.
This is a Messy Family Minute with Mike and Alicia Hernan. Every couple makes decisions differently. Sometimes the person with the stronger personality makes the decision, or the person who cares the most makes the decision, or the person who feels they have the right to make the decision makes the decision. There is a problem with this.
In all of these situations, one spouse can sit on the sidelines, wash their hands of the results, or feel free to second guess and criticize the other. These are not examples of life-giving decision-making.
Joint decision means just that, deciding jointly after discussion, prayer, or simple agreement. But the most important part is that you agree as a couple to share the responsibility for that decision, because mutual decision means mutual responsibility. When you both agree to bear the responsibility for the decision, both of you assume the risk.
That is the type of unity that Christ challenges married couples to strive for. To listen to our podcast on parenting as a team, visit us at messyfamilyminute.org.
It's Call to Communion here on EWTN with Dr. David Anders. If you have a question, here's the number to call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Calls are coming in right now. We would love to talk with you on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Hey, let me tell you about something wonderful now available from EWTN's religious catalog. It is Our Lady of Lourdes Rosary Special. EWTN catalog has a beautiful set of 3 items commemorating Our Lady of Lourdes. First of all, the Lourdes Rosary. This is made of clear crystal glass beads with a polished pewter center and crucifix. The centerpiece features an image of Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette. The back holds a piece of cloth touched to the rock upon which Our Lady appeared. The Our Lady of Rosary tapestry rosary pouch, that's the second item. It's a lovely way to carry that rosary, featuring an image of Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette on one side, and on the reverse, stitched in gold thread, the prayer, Hail Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us sinners. The zippered pouch made in Turkey. And finally, journey with Father Joseph Mary Wolf and Father John Paul Mary Zeller to the Sanctuary of Lourdes for a personal analysis of the miraculous events that occurred there. That is a 2-disc DVD set, 2.5 hours long, plenty of great content. These items can be purchased separately, of course, but you save $15 when you purchase them as a set. Again, it's Our Lady of Lourdes Rosary Special. If you will, it's a threefer. It's available right now at EWTNRC.com. Buy Catholic, shop Catholic. EWTNRC.com. If you're ready now, let's go to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. We begin today with Marie in Ohio, listening on the great Sacred Heart Radio. Hello, Marie. What's on your mind today?
Hi, gentlemen. I pray the rosary daily, and I'm very devout to it, very devoted to it.
Mm-hmm.
I focus very deeply on the mysteries. But about a year and a half ago, and it was kind of when I started praying the rosary, I started to do something that I want to make sure is correct, or okay, I should say. So I kind of dedicate each bead to either a person or a need, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I still focus on the mysteries. Is this something that's okay to do?
Oh, thank you so much for the question. What a delightful question. Praying the rosary is a little bit like eating vegetables. The best way to eat vegetables is the way that will get you to eat the most of them, right? And the rosary is similar, right? Like, there's really no bad way to pray the rosary. And the idea of dedicating each bead of the rosary for a specific intention or for a specific person, I think, is absolutely delightful. The rosary is not part of the liturgy of the church, meaning there are no rubrics to the rosary. So there is no illicit way to pray the rosary.
Right.
Now, you could say the Mass the wrong way. There is no wrong way to do the rosary. And I recognize that there are devotionalists who will get bent out of shape if somebody comes by and says the rosary in some way that they're not accustomed to. And if you're in a group of people, it'd be nice to defer to the expectations of the group and not upset people. But when it comes to your own private prayer life, more is better and deeper is always better. And whatever it is that you can do to bring that about in your own subjective prayer life, that's the thing to do for you.
Okay. Marie, is that helpful for you?
Very much so. Thank you so very much.
You are most welcome. That opens up a line for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to communion here on EWTN with Dr. David Anders. Let's go to Jolio now, a first-time caller from Cincinnati, also listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Hello, Jolio. What's on your mind today, sir?
Hi, Dr. Anders. Thank you for taking my call. My middle son is a non-denominational Christian, and his sister-in-law is getting ready to get married in a same-sex marriage. And I was encouraging him. I said, son, as a Christian, I said, you're not supposed to participate. And he said, Dad, I agree, but how's that any different than having, knowing a guy and a woman that are getting married, and the whole time that the guy was engaged, he's been sleeping around. And to be honest, Doctor, I didn't have any answer for him.
Yeah, I can help you there. There's all the world of difference between a real Casanova type who gets married and two people that are seeking to achieve a marital union in this other way.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy who's sleeping around, we used to say in the old days, well, so-and-so made an honest woman out of her, right? You should have said she made an honest man out of him, right? I mean, if he means it, I mean, if his intent is to live the vows that he's going to make, which is lifelong, indissoluble fidelity to this other person and exclusive fidelity to that person, that means by definition that he is giving up that way of life and entering into another state of life characterized by chastity and fidelity. So that is definitely something to celebrate. But the thing about the alleged same-sex marriage is that it is an entirely different kind of union. And this is why we really can't call it a marriage. I mean, I know they do in civil law, but if I get out a table and put it in my basement and I cover it with green felt and I put little ceramic balls on it that I arrange in a triangular shape and hit them with sticks and try to knock those balls into holes at the ends of the table, I might want to call it baseball. And you can't stop me. I'm going to call this this is the game of baseball. But you and I know that that's not baseball. It is metaphysically, it's ontologically different from baseball, right? Something very different is intended.
Yeah.
And the reason, this is not a Catholic thing, this is not even a Christian thing, this is a human thing. The reason that pagan culture, that Christian culture, that Jewish culture, that Islamic culture, that Hindu culture have something that we all mutually recognize as marriage, and have for millennia, really since the dawn of civilization, well, before the dawn of civilization, is for the blindingly obvious reason that men and women in intimate union tend to have babies. That's what happens when you get an intimate union. When you're a man and a woman, you get babies. And the babies come into the world, and they can't help this. It's a metaphysical necessity. A new community is born, the community of the parents and the child. And so that there are moral realities, human realities that are incumbent, that are imposed upon the individuals involved in virtue of the childbirth.
Yeah.
Namely, who's going to take care of this little bambino? Mm-hmm. Who's equipped to? Who's closest to the action? Who has the best capacity to care for this child and the greatest moral responsibility? Would that be the parents? That would be the parents.
Yes.
And so civilizations around the world have recognizing that this is where babies come from. And there is a moral reality here that is it's a physical fact. You can't walk away from it. Necessitates some kind of social sanction, some kind of protection. People in family life are in many ways more vulnerable, and society comes to their aid and to protect them because the society has a vested interest in the raising of children, in the making of children and the raising of children. And that institution, though it varies a bit from culture to culture, is what we all have traditionally recognized as marriage. Now, something radically different happened in the 20th century, the seeds of which were sown in the 19th century. And that was the idea that the institution that we call marriage exists not because of the blindingly obvious fact of the procreation of children, but because we began to romanticize the erotic union and act like, falling passionately in love with a member of the opposite sex. And all the cooties that I would get, all the little bubbles and swirls of my consciousness that arise in that is the thing to be celebrated. And that's what we ought to hallow. And that absent that, then no marriage exists. There's no reason to have marriage if you don't have all those happy little feelings inside. And once you sanction that as the primary idea, then immediately you get no-fault divorce. Because all that little emotional effluvia doesn't last. But that became the idea that the Romantic movement introduced the idea that that's what we're aiming for. Not children, we can dispense with them, but the hooey feelings, right? The woo-woo feelings. And then if it's about woo-woo feelings, well then whatever floats your woo-woo, we can call marriage.
Sure.
So we lead to the absurdity of this fellow a few years ago who declared he was going to marry the Eiffel Tower. Mm-hmm. Because if marriage is just social sanction for whatever excites you, erotically, well, you recognize now that's come to mean something entirely different.
Sure.
Right? And so, look, we're in a dicey situation culturally, very dicey situation, because the world has just radically reconceived what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a person, what it means to be in relationship, what it means to have sex. All of these things have been radically reconceived in ways that are very deeply subjective and detached from the reality of the body and the reality of the family and the reality of children. And we're all told culturally we just have to swallow this, that this is the new orthodoxy. And if you don't toe the line, you could lose your job, you could lose your reputation. Many people lose family over this. Relationships are breaking.
Mm-hmm.
And an attempt to articulate the not only the traditional but the rational point of view on human sexuality and marriage is now pilloried with or painted with the brush of hate speech. Now you're a hateful person if you do this, right? Allegedly. And we're not given a hearing, right? And there's no equity in the conversation. You know, it's not like, let me hear your point of view and let me share my point of view. It's, no, you've got to listen to my point of view, you Catholic people, and you don't get a point of view, and if you open your mouth, then you're a hateful person, and we're going to cancel you and cut you out and throw you away. How do we negotiate that? I think very carefully, and I think it's incredibly important that we maintain the truth of our position, but that we also lead with the utmost humility and charity and meekness and belie this charge of being hate-filled people.
And don't forget to pray. There you go. Thank you so much for your call. Call to communion here on EWTN. Let's go to Bailey now in Louisiana, listening on the great Catholic Community Radio. Hey, Bailey, what's on your mind today, sir?
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
I have a question, like kind of a philosophical question.
Mm-hmm.
It essentially boils down to, is this like the best of all possible worlds? Like,
Leibniz.
So God created the world. I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were channeling Leibniz there, the philosopher Leibniz and
Yeah.
Candide, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so the question is, like, God created this world knowing that we could fall, and then we did fall, and then we were redeemed by Christ. But how come he couldn't have just created a world, or why didn't he just create a world where we didn't fall, sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the question. Well, I have no answer to the question of whether it is the best of all possible worlds. I don't think that question is answerable. I think it's probably ultimately meaningless. I would say the world is perfect in the sense that it does exactly the job that God designed it to do, right? Which is to manifest the glory of God and his goodness, truth, and beauty in the creation that he made, including in the moral experience of rational free creatures. And so there is a good to be achieved in creating a world that contains rational free creatures that God knows necessarily will sin. Or they won't sin necessarily, but he necessarily knows that they will sin freely, right? And what is that good? What is the good of creating a world in which you know rational creatures will sin freely? It is the good of a world in which moral progress can be made. A moral universe that was utterly static would not be a world where people could make moral progress.
Yeah.
And moral progress is a story worth telling. I mean, that's why, quite honestly, the entire Marvel superhero saga is the story of Tony Stark, if you saw any of these. It's the story of a narcissist and an egoist who learns better and gives his life to redeem the world. And we all think, that's wonderful. Imagine if Stan Lee had written the character of Tony Stark as a perfect saint from day one. What a boring... They wouldn't have gotten a blockbuster, series out of that.
Yeah.
You have to have this moral transformation to make it interesting, to make it compelling. And there's a kind of beauty in that. Jesus says there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner that repents than over 99 righteous people that have no need of repentance. And, variety is beautiful. The world reflects God the way a prism reflects light. And any one corner of the prism is intrinsically beautiful, but it does not capture the totality. It's just one aspect in comparison to all these others. And you need that symphony of color to really represent something of the totality of the beauty of light. And reality is like that. It reflects God in these disparate, different ways. And the totality of the picture is necessary for the beauty of the whole. I mean, God could have made a world without cephalopods. I really like cephalopods. Thank God for cephalopods.
Or without color.
Or without color.
I saw a video the other day of peacocks, and they're all different. They will all spread out their colors, different colors in a different way. I mean, it's just fascinating.
And how about the duck-billed platypus?
How about that platypus?
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, talk about being made out of spare parts. Wow. Bailey, thanks so much for your call. In a moment, we'll talk with Lee, a first-time caller from Jackson, Mississippi. Also, Charles, a first-time caller from Portland, Oregon. A couple lines open for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
Father Benedict Groeschel.
I often go back to my childhood. In church, we love to be reverent to Christ present in the Eucharist, to Christ on the cross. But I was also impressed by our sisters who taught us in school to pray before every class, to pray for what we needed. Because we could be irreverent, we were taught to go to confession on Saturday and to ask ourselves, did we say our prayers well and without distraction? All this was reverence. Now what do I see? I hear one irreverence after another. And week after week, month after month, the media churns out things that make fun of religion in general and make fun of Christianity in particular, and particularly make fun of the Catholic Church. No class. Absolutely no class.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
This is Dr. David Anders. If you missed part of today's show, catch the encore tonight at 11 Eastern or anytime at EWTN Podcast Central. Visit us at EWTN.com/radio/podcasts.
The EWTN home video highlight for April is Work Out Your Salvation. In this teaching series, Father Wade Menezes demonstrates how to work out your salvation by taking an active role in shaping your destiny. Learn 5 important steps that will lead to a life of grace and virtue. Order your DVD set at EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Matt Swaim here. Join Anna Mitchell and me on the Sunrise Morning Show as we give you the latest news, weather, sports, and everything you need to bring your Catholic faith into your everyday life. Now back to Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders.
Hey, what's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about that here on EWTN's Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. We have 2 lines open right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. We'll get to those lines in a moment here. First, let me tell you about a new book now available from EWTN Publishing. It's called For Eternity, Restoring the Priesthood and Our Spiritual Fatherhood by Robert Cardinal Sarah, who says, we have to look at the truth head on. The priesthood seems to be failing. Cardinal Sarah has collected the writings of the greatest saints to help priests rediscover the essence of their priesthood so that the people of God can renew their gaze upon them. For Eternity, Restoring the Priesthood and Our Spiritual Fatherhood by Robert Cardinal Sarah. It's a new book now available from EWTN Publishing, available now at EWTNRC.com. Buy Catholic, shop Catholic. EWTNRC.com. Let's talk now with Lee, a first-time caller in Jackson, Mississippi, watching today on EWTN television. Hello, Lee. What's on your mind today, sir?
All right. The Bible says God created the earth 6 days and he rested on the 7th day. Jesus went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. The 10 Commandments is keep the Sabbath day holy. That's in prime sunset to same sunset. Now, the Catholic Church was influenced by Constantine. Why don't you all keep the Sabbath as it is in the Old and New Testament?
Yeah, thank you. Because St. Paul says, don't let anyone condemn you. That's what you're doing right now, I think, by the way. Don't let anyone condemn you in matters of food and drink or observing festivals, new moons, or Sabbaths. These are only a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. So we don't keep the Sabbath of the Ten Commandments the way the Jews kept it because we're not Jews. And the book of Galatians is pretty clear that the entirety of the prescriptive law of the Old Testament was a pedagogue to lead us to Christ, and the commands of the new law are reducible to two: love God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself.
There you go. Lee, thanks so much for your call. Here's one now from Charles, a first-time caller in Portland, Oregon, listening on the great Modern Day Radio. Charles, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I'm a 90-year-old Korean veteran who my wife just died. We were married 62 years and just died recently. And she taught religion, had an advanced degree in religion from the University of San Francisco Catholic, and taught religion for over 50 years with the immigrants and all the people in the diocese of San Jose, California. She was the first woman pastoral associate in that diocese. But I'm asked the question: Blessed Mother, a woman brought Jesus to us, and more women were at the crucifixion with Jesus at the cross. Why don't women have power? Too much power in the Catholic Church, kind of like in the United States, women couldn't vote, couldn't do anything until the 19th Amendment. What's wrong in the Catholic Church that we don't have women deacons or women priests?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. So you asked two different questions. One of them was about female power in the church, and the other one was about ordained ministry in the Catholic Church. And I would like to differentiate those two things conceptually, because it is possible to have power and not be an ordained person, and it is possible to be an ordained person and not have power. I know priests, for example, who are pastoral associates, or what we call, parochial vicars, who basically have no jurisdiction at all. They don't call any of the shots. They don't decide where the money goes. They do what they're told. I mean, they pretty much have jurisdiction over the liturgy that they say. And even then, they can still be told what to do. The pastor of the parish or the bishop can come by and say, well, hey, I don't want you to celebrate the liturgy according to this form or using that rite or whatever. And he just has to say, sir, yes, sir, and do what he's told. So being an ordained person does not necessarily convey on you like all this power. Now, you can be a woman, lay or religious, and exercise enormous power in the church without the clerical state. I'll give you two historical examples. So I don't know if you're aware, the network you're listening to right now is called EWTN, the Eternal Word Television Network, and Global Catholic Radio. And it's, one time, it's still the case, Tom, is the largest religious broadcaster in the world.
It is.
Okay, just want to make sure I have my facts straight there.
Yeah.
We're all over the world, and we do our best. We hope we have an influence. And the foundress of this network was a woman, a religious, by the name of Mother Angelica. Tremendously powerful woman, not only over her own convent and over the network that she founded, but a tremendous influence in the lives of very, very many, including priests and bishops. And the Holy See definitely knew about Mother Angelica.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So lots of power, not the ordained state. Here's another woman. I might actually give you two more. Catherine of Siena, lay Dominican, third order Dominican in medieval Italy. Not an ordained person. And yet she had a personal charism. I think that she was a prophetess. And that's my personal opinion. And she would go and tell the popes what to do. And they would go, meep! And they would do what they were told, right? And she would march out onto the battlefield and tell warring princes to lay down their arms.
Yeah.
And they would listen to her. Go read her life. It's unbelievable. In a time as particularly much more sexist age when women were not highly regarded, that she had this personal charism that was so overpowering, her holiness was so compelling that people would listen to her and do what she said. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Saint Mother Teresa, very diminutive little tiny woman, not a lot of jurisdiction in the worldly way, but a very pro-choice politician in the United States was once upbraided by her publicly for his stance in support of abortion. The media asked this fellow, former president, what do you say to that? And he responded, "It is impossible to argue with a life so well lived." You mentioned yourself that your own wife was a pastoral associate in the church, teacher of theology and religion. I work in Catholic education. It's overwhelmingly governed and executed by women. So I see women exercising power and jurisdiction in the church all the time. Now, if you said to me, "But Anders, don't you think that there could very well be remnants of sexism in the church's administration, that there are ways in which women have been historically excluded from power and decision-making, and in places where theology would not necessarily exclude them, but habit and custom and prejudice have excluded them?" I would say absolutely yes, that's true. And if that is the case, that's shameful, and the church should make efforts to correct that. Now, I do think the church has come a long way in correcting that in recent years. I mean, look, for example, to an institution like the International Theological Commission. A lot of women on that commission, right? And there are women that work in Vatican dicasteries, and there are women that have real positions of influence in the Vatican, right? And as well as in diocesan governance. Now, is there room to do better? Sure. Are bishops immune from prejudice and chauvinism and bigotry? Absolutely not. They're human beings, right? Yep. And so there you go.
Charles, thanks so much for your call. Appreciate that. And here is Braden now, calling from Baton Rouge, listening on Catholic Community Radio. Hello, Braden. What's on your mind today, sir?
Hello, Dr. Anders. I've heard you say before that Protestants and non-Catholic Christians can be saved. And this is so. Although when I was studying the Catechism, I came across that there is no, the quote, "there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church." How can these two statements be reconciled?
Yeah, thank you. So when a person lays hold of a means of grace that properly belongs to the church and yet has been broken out of the sort of the completed whole of Catholic identity, that means of grace can be for that individual a means of salvation, and they are, as it were, saved by the Catholic Church in an extended way. So let me give you an example. My Protestant friends have got 66 of the 73 biblical books.
Yep.
Where do you think they got those 66 from? They got them from the Catholic Church.
Sure.
They have the sacrament of baptism validly. Where do you think they got it from? They got it from the Catholic Church. Even more interestingly, many Protestants, most Protestants, would believe the Christological dogmas of the first 4 centuries, from Nicaea and Ephesus and Constantinople and Chalcedon. They sure as heck did not get those from First Baptist. They got them from the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And if these things become for them a means of sanctification and redemption, then they have been saved through the ministration of the Catholic Church. And those very same elements are, the Council said, forces impelling to Catholic unity. So like many Protestants, I was raised with all these elements of Catholic faith and tradition while being told that the church was the whore of Babylon and the Antichrist, not realizing that there were seeds of Catholic truth seeping into my mind in spite of the best efforts of my pastors and teachers to keep them out. And, of course, those seeds eventually blossomed in bringing me to full communion in the Catholic Church.
There you go. Braden, thanks so much for your call. It's Call to Communion here on EWTN. Hey, be sure to join us for More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. That's coming up tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. On tomorrow's program, are you struggling with anger lately, or maybe struggling with angry people? Well, Dr. Greg and Lisa are here to help you cool things down. That's tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on EWTN Radio. Let's go now to Baltimore and talk with Jane, a first-time caller, watching us on EWTN television. Hello, Jane. What's on your mind today? Jane in Baltimore, are you there?
Do you mean Joan of Arc?
Yes. Can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, I want to know what I can do about my children not going to church.
How old are your children?
51 to 71, 6 of them. And I
Yes.
said,
Thank you. Not much. Not much is the answer to the question. With 51 to 71-year-old children, if they're not going to church, there's not much you can do beyond praying for them and loving them sacrificially, right? And they already know what you think.
They do.
I mean, like especially the 71-year-old. He's been knowing what you thought for 71 years. Telling him again, if it didn't work the first 71 years, it's not likely to work in year 72.
Could be counterproductive.
Could be counterproductive. So we need to try something different. Just focus on loving them and praying for them.
There you go, Jane. Thank you so much for your call from Baltimore. Good to hear from you today. It is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Interesting question here from Vincent, who says, the Roman Catholic Church has fulfilled a prophecy in the book of Daniel 7:25. The quote here, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws." So, question is, has not the Roman Catholic Church changed times via its Gregorian calendar and ignored biblical feast days? Has not the Roman Catholic Church abolished the laws of the Lord, a.k.a. the laws of Moses? Please comment. Thank you, Vincent.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. I don't think there is a biblical scholar on the planet who is a critical scholar that is attuned to the history. And I'm excluding fundamentalists, of course, from this. That would think that is the proper way to interpret Daniel 7. Pretty much the universal consensus of all historical scholars is that Daniel has Antiochus Epiphanes in mind. This would be the Seleucid emperor, the Greek emperor, that attempted to eliminate circumcision and sacrifice in the temple and to impose Greek worship upon the Jews. That's what is in view here. And does the Catholic Church fulfill Daniel 7? I would say so, because Daniel 7 predicts one like a son of man who will come and inaugurate the kingdom of God, against which no human kingdom will stand. And of course, Christ did that. He came and said, the kingdom of God is here in my ministry, and he appointed representatives, vicars, if you will, to govern this kingdom in his absence, and the chief of which was St. Peter, to whom he gave the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And St. Peter's successors, the popes, continue to possess the power of the keys. So is the church the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7? Yes, in being the presence of the kingdom now here in mystery, not in the changing of times and seasons. Now, if you're upset about the Gregorian calendar, what do you possibly think that has to do with the love of God and neighbor? Right? Ultimately, those are the commandments that we have to fulfill to be saved.
Right,
I mean, do you really think that, if the church advocated for a 56-mile-an-hour speed limit as opposed to a 55, do you really think that that's of great substance, of note, that that's a material difference that will affect the salvation of souls? No, of course not.
Seems like admin to me.
It's admin, yeah.
There you go. Vincent, thank you so much for your email. Here's one from the Philippines, I believe. No, Canada. Okay, this is from Noel, who says, "Hi, Tom and Dr. Anders. I'm a regular listener and a fan of your program. Really, really like your show. I like it so much, I'm thinking of producing my own Call to Communion T-shirt." What do you think about that?
Well, all right then. Would you leave the call letters on the shirt so people will know how to listen?
I think that's a great idea. Anyway, Noel says, "I grew up in the Philippines." That's where I got that. "And I am now residing here in Manitoba in Canada. I have a simple question. I'm used to saying, 'Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you.' And what I hear here in Canada is, 'Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.' What would be the proper way to say it?"
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum.
There you go.
Right.
David takes the high road.
So, I mean, like this is an English translation of a Latin prayer, and look, the Latin doesn't have the same distinction between you, thee and thou, and you. It does have a distinction, but it's a singular plural distinction, right? And in English, the word "thee" is the traditional way of rendering that singular form of the second person pronoun, and "you" was the plural form of the second person pronoun. That's gone away in English now.
Yeah.
Right. And so now we'll say "you" for an individual, we'll say "you" for a group, and "thee" sticks around when people want to sound formal and fancy, or when they want to quote more archaic language to give a sense of formality to things, right? In that sense, that sort of formal sense of Latin doesn't even have that. It just distinguishes singular and plural. And so really both of them are correct. It's just one is more colloquial and one is hearkening back to an earlier age to try to give an air of formality and dignity to it, but it doesn't really matter. And I think you said you were from the Philippines. You could pray it in Tagalog if you want to.
Sure could. And how do we do the first person plural here in the South?
Y'all.
Y'all.
No, second person plural.
Second person.
Second person plural. Y'all.
There we go. All right. Noel, thanks so much for your email. Appreciate your contribution to the program. Here's one now from Paul. This is very interesting. Why would a Protestant want to go to adoration if he or she doesn't believe in the real presence? Also, why don't Protestants have their own adoration?
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the question. So when I was a Protestant and I did not believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, I nevertheless occasionally visited Catholic parishes in Iowa City.
Did you?
Not before Iowa City, because before then I probably was way too close-minded. But I started visiting them in Iowa City because I liked the quiet, and it seemed like a good place for meditative prayer.
Okay.
And so I think I would have been attracted to certain adoration chapels for the same reason, regardless of whether or not I believed in the real presence. And why do they not have their own adoration? Well, they don't adore the Blessed Sacrament, to be sure, but there are certainly Protestants that practice various forms of contemplative prayer. And the tradition of going into one's quote-unquote prayer closet to adore the Lord in private is a big part of evangelical Protestant tradition and Puritanism. And in different Protestant communions that I was involved in over the years, designating a place of public but quiet contemplative prayer is part of the architecture and liturgy of that particular tradition without the Blessed Sacrament. Heck, I was in DFW this weekend, and they have a public chapel, which is there's no Blessed Sacrament, but it was a space reserved for contemplation and prayer, and it was, they had the Bible and they had the Quran and they had a few other, accoutrements there to cater to all types, but it was still the idea of setting aside a place for prayer.
I think that is great. And there are a number of, I can still remember the chapel at O'Hare in Chicago, and they actually have regular Mass there.
That's right.
Which is just a wonderful thing.
I don't know how anybody could ever make it, like you have to cross 3 concourses while still trying to catch a connection.
Well, that's a different story there. But, it's real easy to get a hot dog.
That's true. That's true.
Paul, thanks so much for your email. Matt in North Carolina says, I recently heard a Protestant complaining that the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls in Rome was tiny when compared to St. Peter's Basilica, the implication being that this is an injustice to Paul. Would you mind speculating on the origins of such thought?
What a weird thing for a Protestant to say.
Isn't it?
I mean, since when does a Protestant want the Catholic Church to build bigger basilicas?
Yeah.
That's an oddity, okay?
It is.
But it does reflect Catholic theology, because the Catholic doctrine is that Rome is Peter's see. See meaning the seat of his episcopacy, of his bishopric, and the Pope is the successor to St. Peter, right? So that's the idea there.
Yeah.
That's the idea. Now, Protestant Christians often like to conceive of themselves as being particularly Pauline, and I understand why, because Luther attempted to justify his Reformation by a peculiar reading of St. Paul, especially the books of Romans and Galatians. But I think, honestly, that the Catholics are the more Pauline Christians in terms of their doctrine. I think they actually penetrate the mind of St. Paul better, and Catholic theology and architecture, for that matter, I think reflect a very Pauline pattern.
Matt, thanks so much for your email from North Carolina. Here's one now from Carmelina. Dr. Anders, if every sexual act has to be open to life, how does that apply to older adults in their 60s? Childbearing time has come and gone. Aging issues prevent intercourse. Does that mean that the couple can't do any sexual acts since it is not going to lead to intercourse? Thanks. God bless. Love your show. Carmelina.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. So with couples that are infertile, the important thing is that they are engaged in the kind of union that would naturally be fulfilled in procreation if such things were possible.
Okay.
And we leave that possibility up to God. I mean, Abraham and Sarah, after all, the end of the story. Now, when it comes to what kind of erotic activity could an older couple legitimately be involved in short of coitus, I do not want to get too graphic on the show, but let's just say that there is a significant amount of leeway that's allowable here, even with a fertile couple, that respects the dignity of their intimacy and their love for one another and all the rest of it. But always with the sensitivity that we not objectify the other person or our own bodies, but ultimately recognize that this is a self-donation that is ultimately ordered towards, even if it never actually achieves the procreation of children.
Carmelina, thanks so much for your email. We'll close with this from Adam in Mississippi. Dr. Anders, could you please unpack the seeming discrepancy between what some early church fathers mention about the prohibition of kneeling for prayers on Sundays and Easter versus our practices today? I'm not sure if I understand when Tertullian, Jerome, Council of Nicaea mention not kneeling. Can you please connect the historical dots for me as to how we have come to kneel today on Sundays?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate the question. So if I may not have time to go into this in great depth because we're about to end the show, but in a nutshell, the important thing ultimately is neither to kneel nor not to kneel. The important thing is to offer our lives in living sacrifice out of love for God and neighbor. And things like liturgical posture and liturgical tradition are just embellishments, ultimately, in the service of charity and virtue. And so when people become really hyper-concerned with the rubrics of the Mass without, as Jesus would say, paying attention to the weightier matters of the law, like love and justice and mercy, then they're missing the point of the whole thing. And different rubrics and different traditions and different customs about the Mass emerge in different cultural contexts, and therefore they have a different meaning in those different cultures. So in the East, in the Christian East, the sense was that standing is the posture of sons. Kneeling is the posture for slaves. In Carolingian Latin Europe, in Saxon Europe, in feudalism, kneeling is the posture of vassals with respect to a suzerain. And so that was the posture that was taken with respect to Christ, who's King Jesus over the universe. And these are different cultural traditions exhibiting different aspects of the Christian mystery. And so if I go to a Byzantine church, I stand. If I go to a Latin church, I kneel.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, thanks for listening to us in Mississippi. A great, fast-moving hour. Hope that you'll join us for this same program tomorrow at the same time. Dr. David Anders, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
We do it Monday through Friday at EWTN's Call to Communion, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, with an encore at 11 p.m. Eastern, which is 8 p.m. on the West Coast. Check out the podcast anytime you wish by going to EWTNradio.net, EWTNradio.net. On behalf of our fantastic team here, I'm Tom Price along with Dr. David Anders. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your company. We will see you tomorrow at the same time for Call to Communion. Have a beautiful and wonderful day, and God bless.